thinking about the statistics that reveal that girls have dominated in academics, wondering if our colonial classroom disadvantages our boys' development. Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Senior Policy Fellow Marcellus C. Taylor got to say about the fundamentals challenges and what's necessary to ignite our young boys' appetite for excellence in education.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We're here this evening having a nice conversation on some of the things that's going to help us to build our nation to higher heights. And we have Mr. Marcellus Taylor. Welcome, Marcellus. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. You're quite welcome. And it's a pleasure that you, and delighted that you actually took the time to bless us with your presence and knowledge and expertise and all those good things that is going to come today as we move forward with this discussion.
Well, we'll see.
So join.
We'll see what you say at the end of the show.
Well, join our co-sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Page Investments, and our friends from Something to Think About. Jot your questions, comments, or concerns in the chats below, and we'll endeavor to pick them up and respond to them as we can. Please, please, please keep them all appropriate. So, Marcellus Taylor, a man that I've known, I don't know for how long now, more than I probably know myself, you know.
No, the other way around.
The other way around. Oh,
Yeah.
Yes. So you would have been a man that I know who is a man of God behind your every movement. You have the integrity of a saint, and you're a professional. Utmost, always trying to be a professional, but you don't stray from the truth. That's one thing I've always found with you, that I could get you in trouble because I know you was going to tell nothing that wasn't the truth. But, you know, when we look at this in this day and age that we have, truth is something that really is void of a lot of people. We try to tell the truth that is going to bring likes or popularity and stuff like that. We didn't come from that school. You know, you came from a school with a family from roots from the Camp Road area, and you know that pedigree for excellence that people back in the day would have had has spilled over to you and your siblings, etc. And we just look forward to you continuing to build this society wherever you go. And so, as we look at those things, we want you to know that we appreciate all your service that you've given so far, the 30-odd plus years in one chapter, and now you move on to another chapter. We look for another 30 years to put your fingerprints on our national development.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit about one or two, because you have 1,000,001 milestones that you accomplished in your last chapter, and just to highlight, because we want people to know that we're having a conversation here that is built based on, like I say, on truth and information that we all ought to know so we can make better decisions as we move forward. So tell us a little bit about the milestones.
Well, what I would say is that I've had a wonderful career in the education sector. The first 10 years I spent actually working in schools, and most of those years were in family island communities. And I think working in family island communities was a wonderful thing for me not just as a professional, but as an individual. because it helped me to appreciate where we are as a country in terms of our national development. It also helped me to realize the importance of serving people who require your assistance. And it isn't always an easy thing, but at the end of the day, when you have made the impact or help others to become better people because of the work that you have done, and you see how they appreciate it, even if they don't necessarily say the words "I appreciate" or "I thank," you can tell it by the way they respond to you when they see you in other fora at later points in time.
Mhm.
Then I spent the last 20 in the Ministry of Education itself. And most of my time in education, I've worked as an educational planner and someone working with education policy. Most people will be aware of my last, I guess, 10 years when I served as deputy director and director of education.
Wow.
And I would say my time as director was largely during the COVID period. I was director for 5 years, and about 3 of those 5 years was smack dab in the middle of fighting COVID. But I think we were able to do some good things given the circumstances.
Mhm.
Able to amalgamate some schools because of declining enrollment in the Family Islands. I think about 10 schools we amalgamated. We were able to develop, implement, and get up and running a virtual school. And I'm not talking about the stuff that was being done during COVID. I'm talking
Right.
about the school that we established before COVID to ensure that students in Family Islands could get a full range of subjects in the upper secondary school that heretofore they either could not get or could not get at the same quality level. We also did a number of things as it relates to curriculum development. We introduced a curriculum development cycle. And in the short time while I was there, most of the time being in COVID, we were able to revise more than 20 curricular guides, which was quite a feat. I mean, under ordinary circumstances,
Right.
to revise 20 in 3 years is good, but to do it, being in COVID was even more remarkable. And thanks to the colleagues who really worked hard and focused on that. We also work systematically to try to codify policies and create manuals for our professionals so that people could be clear on what the various rules are and so that we could have a standardized way of operating. And then,
Mhm.
there are a number of other things. I don't want to really get into too much of the
Yeah.
nitty-gritty, but the focus was really on trying to strengthen the organization, to really make the organization more policy driven and and an organization that in its operation is even-handed, is thinks of in a careful way the steps that we take, and also have the conviction of our decisions backed with whatever evidence we have, so that it could stand to the test of time.
Yes, and that's awesome. And why I wanted you to go through that was because a lot of time people only know about what they see or hear in the media, and they think that that's all a ministry is doing. And so I just wanted you to highlight some of those things because that's a lot to accomplish, and particularly under those conditions. So like we say, we take your hat off to you. But what I liked about what you said repeatedly during that information session just now is that you kept saying we. And today in our system, we seem to think that leaders seem to think that there's no we, it's only I. So, that's a big thing for me.
Well, I will tell you, no enterprise as vast as the education sector in the Bahamas relative to the country
Mm-hmm.
can be done by one person. And even if it could be done by one person, you should not want to do it alone, because it's all a part of the process of enabling people to become empowered and to self-actualize. And that can't happen, just like you play a game of basketball and you have
Mm-hmm.
one person dribbling all around and all the teammates just standing around. That's
Right.
not the way you build a team. That's not the way you win. That's not the way you ensure that there is continuity. And of course, now that I'm not there, I'm confident that many of the colleagues, because they were involved in a lot of these things, at least to whatever extent it is of value, now have those skills and that understanding of what to do because of the way we saw it to work.
Right. Awesome. Well, now you open this chapter at the Government and Public Policy Institute. And I think that's an engine of the University of Bahamas? Or
Yes, it
it
is.
just affixed to it?
It's
Okay.
kind of like a think tank
Yeah,
attached
okay.
to the University of Bahamas. The
Mhm.
focus is on three areas. Of course, it's the name itself tells you what the overall focus is, which is
Right.
to support government's public policy making and so on. But we kind of do that in three ways. One, we carry out research. The second thing that we do is we manage consultancies. So if someone designs a project, or if they want us to design a project and then implement that, like for instance, you want to start a breakfast program, I just call that off the top.
Right.
We could manage that whole process of implementation, and then also we train senior public officers. And so these three pillars are designed to, in their own particular way, assist in strengthening the public sector in the Bahamas' ability to advance the policy agenda, which will ultimately advance our national development.
And by training those senior public officers, does that include senators and parliamentarians, etc.?
Well, I think that is not off the table, but at this point, the focus has been on persons, undersecretaries, deputy
Right. Okay.
secretaries, first assistant secretaries, etc.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, that's impressive as a whole. And I'm glad to see that something like that is actually in motion, and you have people like yourselves. I think that might be chaired by
Mr.
Prime Minister, right?
Yeah, Mr. Shivago Lang is the executive
Right.
director,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the leader of
Yeah.
the team. Yeah.
Great. Well, Peter F. Drucker, people who know me know I love this quote. And he says that one cannot manage what one does not measure, or one cannot measure is his exact quote. But I like to say what we don't measure, because it's one and the same almost. Because if you can't, you can't. But if you don't, I mean, you have a choice, but you still don't. And so, when we look at that, then this evening we really want to get down to the nuts and bolts of answering this question as to do our colonial classrooms disadvantage our young boys' growth or development? And we want to look at that. So we want to focus on what we cannot do and what or do not measure itself, and the impact on young boys and their educational development. For clarity, and just to put us all on the same page, not to say that anybody's definition is right or wrong, but I just use that education is a blend between academics, experience, and exposure. And that blend determines the level of somebody's education. And that's my take. You might have a different one. I don't know if you do, or if you care to share it, that would be good.
Well, I'd kind of like respond to what you said more than trying to advance a definition, because that might be problematic for me, because all kind of things might come up. So we don't want to do that. But what I would say is I like you speaking about it being a blend, and that the blend is not simply academics, but it also ties in your experiences. UNESCO styles learning, for instance, that comes in three forms, right? Formal learning, which is the learning that you do at school. Non-formal learning, which is the learning that you might do, but it doesn't lead to a certificate. And then finally, informal learning, which is the learning that we do when we watch an interview like this, or when we talk under the tree, or when we just pick up a book on our own and read, or any experiences that we have, right?
YouTube.
And for me, I think, although I don't have any numbers to back this up, but intuitively, I feel that most learning actually comes in the informal sector. Most people learn most things just through their life experiences. Unfortunately, there is not a strong link in some people's mind about the learning that you do outside of school and the learning that you do in school. And I think while, of course, a school has a curriculum and there are certain things that you're expected to learn because these curricula have been designed with certain outcomes in mind, we still have to realize that people learn outside of school. And so that has a couple of implications. The kind of environment in which you're in when you're not in school ought to be one that encourages learning. Because once you're in an environment that encourages learning, whichever setting you find yourself in, your orientation will be towards learning.
Okay.
The second thing is, if we do appreciate that learning comes in all forms, there will of necessity be a desire to make a stronger link between those things learned outside of school when students come in school. So even the types of examples that we give, even the things that we study, the literature that we expose students to, all of that may be somewhat different if we understand and appreciate what it is that people are learning outside of school, so that we can build on those experiences so that their overall learning experience could be of greatest value.
Right. Awesome. So as we look at this then, there's always this age-old question that seems never to be answered clearly, even though you would have done it before, maybe a number of other persons, I think the former minister and the present minister and other people. But either we don't want to listen, we don't want to hear it, or the like. But this is this issue of our grading systems. And my mom tells me that what we use in the Bahamas, Marjorie Davis, the late Marjorie Davis, was given the task to translate and adopt that in there. But and you also reference the what we did originally with the UK system being a colony and so forth, hence part of the name or the title. And so, if I could use my fingers here to pull up, if I hope I didn't lose it. But we had the yes. Where did it go? The scale. That's what I'm trying to pull up. The 9-point scale. And back in the day when I was in school, and you probably were still in school, they were still using the scale too. It was a 5-point scale, but we have a 7 now. Is this?
Yes. So, yes.
Help us translate that, because some of our baby boomers and even some of our younger people, we just get frustrated.
Well, I think I will give a little bit of background so that your listeners and viewers could have a little bit more of an understanding of the genesis of all of this. And what we're talking about is the grading scale that is used for the national exams, and we're talking about the BGCSE in particular. But prior to there being a BGCSE, the Bahamas didn't have its own exams. The Bahamas, as a colony of Britain, and then even into the independence period, we carried over with the exams that the UK used at the time, which were called the General Certificate of Education, the GCE. And the GCE was in fact an exam that sought to measure the ability of students for the purposes of matriculating into university. They were not really designed for people who wanted to go to work. They were designed to test whether or not someone was suitable to matriculate or to enter into university. It had a 5-point scale. Grades A, B, and C were considered grades that were acceptable passes for you to go into university. So you could get into university with a grade A, B, or C. When you got a grade D or E, in effect, you did not meet the standard. It registered some level of performance. You had a sense that, okay, I missed it by a little bit or whatever. If you got a D, you had a sense that, okay, maybe if I write it again, I could get a C. But really, you did not meet the standard to go to university. This was the exam that we also did. And anyone who was around during that period of time know that there was a lot of issues around accessing the exam. Right. You had to go and ask teachers, and teachers oh, I don't think you'll be able to pass. They wouldn't let you write the exam and all that kind of thing. And a lot of people who took the exam, they got a bunch of U and E's and just didn't do well. But it didn't mean that they didn't know anything. They just didn't do well on that exam. They just did not demonstrate competency to matriculate into a UK-based university. But you know, in the UK, they had a second exam, which we did not use here, which was the CSE, Certificate of Secondary Education. And that also had 5 points. And it went grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
And the idea of that exam was to register the competency. It was something like how Pitman exams were.
Right. Okay.
So Pitman exams were lower than the GCE. And they would be exams that you would take more for, you know, if you wanted to be a secretary or if you wanted to be an accounts clerk in a small business or whatever you do, your little Pitman accounts and whatever, right? So the CSE, this Certificate of Secondary Education, was similar to that in that it was an exam used to indicate performance, but more for people who were getting ready to enter directly into the workforce. And they would say in the UK, if you receive a 1 on the CSE scale, that would be equivalent to a C in the GCE. So the very top grade in that exam that was basically catering to people going to work would be equated to the lowest grade that would be acceptable for going to university. So in the UK, what they decided to do, right, as educational access became more like a right, or at least something that governments accepted, that we should give more people a chance to, you know, move up the line, and giving people more mobility, a less static type of socio-economic environment. They decided that what they would do is develop an exam that would actually measure not just the 20% who will go into university who did the GCE, but that would also include those people who were going directly into the world of work. So now they wanted an exam to measure the competency of 85% or thereabouts of the school leaving cohort.
Okay.
And so in merging those two exams, what they did was they kept the A, B, C, D, and E from the GCE. They equated the 1 to from the Certificate of Secondary Education. They equated a 1 to the C, the 2 grade to the D, the 3 grade to the E. But remember, I told you it's 5 points, so you still had 4 and 5.
Right.
And so because they were using the letters, then they introduced the F and the G. So that created our 7-point scale. And so now you have one exam that measures the performance, instead of just 20%, of 85% of your cohort. And the idea behind it is that every one of those 7 grades reflect a level of positive achievement by the student. Not all of them ready for university, but to be a checkout lady at the food store, you don't need a C in GC math to do that. And to be a landscaper, you need to know a little bit about some chemistry, but certainly not the same amount of chemistry as a teacher or a physician. So this exam now, which they call the GCSE, and I don't want to spend time in it, but even just the name is a combination of those 2 exams, is what gave them in the UK originally the 7-point scale, which they eventually moved to this 9-point scale that you have up here on the board. And then we decided that we would not join the Caribbean, but rather we would make a Bahamian version of the GCSE. So we call it B for Bahamas, GCSE. So that's where our exam. And even to this day, Cambridge provides the quality assurance on those exams. They're developed locally and all of that, but Cambridge ensures that the rigor and the standard is of international repute.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And so One thing I wanted to say on that though is even though the way you highlighted is two scales merged into one, but really and truly when we look, we're missing the vocational student because some of those would have fallen into the B's and the C's kind of thing. Maybe not an A student because most vocational people are creative people, and so the A's is not something that we strive for. At least I surely didn't, right?
Well, wait a
And
minute, though. Wait a minute. I
go
didn't
ahead,
say
go
this,
ahead.
but I could say this at this point. The BGCSE has more than 20 subjects. I think it's like 26 or 27 subjects.
Okay,
And as a part of that collection of subjects, there are technical and vocational subjects in auto mechanics,
right,
electronics, in woodwork, in cookery, and that kind of, I forget exactly what it's called. It's something like family and consumer science or something they call it now. But they have a range of subjects that are offered,
right,
and 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 this might be symptomatic of another problem. But if you look at the number of students who sit those exams, is minuscule.
right. Right.
Sometimes in the
That
whole
that's
year,
big
you
now
only
though.
have
Yeah.
200 students doing auto mechanics or something like that.
Yeah, we had a discussion by the water cooler the other day at work, and that was one of the things that they were saying that a lot of people's children who work with me wanted to do more of these classes, and there was some pushback that you needed to continue to do uh, the traditional classes, and hence that's one of the things that spurred my mind that I needed to have the show. But we don't want to go too deep into stuff like that either. But just looking at the whole picture, right? Because what I have on the board now is the what I was going to say was that what you described last was the Bahamianization of it, and so we added all of these different 20 odd subjects, etc. When I panned what was in the UK, that didn't necessarily have all of those, but I don't know, they might have it, but I just didn't find it. But not to focus on that, but really just to say this, that somewhere down the line we have to embrace both systems because I personally believe that most of our people are kinetic people, kinetic learners, and so we have to make that adjustment. But I wanted to highlight here this D knowledge, which it comes out of the statistics document that you would have sent me. Somehow I missed and deleted the slides that I had on the screen or in the stage to put on the screen. But the definition is saying specific and appropriate to the task, comprehension, evident, critical thinking, problem solving skills, satisfactory. So I think in the Bahamas we have this view that D means that the person is a failure. But according to the definition in our BGCSEs, I don't see that as being determined to be failure. And when you look at people like myself, who would have been teaching, literally teaching GCE, the old system, math at the top class with the Honorable Carlton E. Francis. There was a couple of us who used to teach Denise Tink, who is now at Commonwealth Bank chief, etc. There was a couple of us who were doing it and assisting him in teaching with the rest of the persons in the class. I got a C, to your point where you say people were getting all these different grades. And then for the other 7 classes that I took, was it 7 or 6 other classes? I got a U. So obviously something, Mr. Francis was prepared to go to London for it, but my mom talked him out of it after about 2 or 3 weeks of talking. But to me, it didn't make a difference because the day I sit, having made my contribution in one field and now doing it in a different space just like you are. And if we were, my point to that is that if we look at this D and we write off people because they are looking at D, but we're not finding out what is their love language for learning, then we might be missing people like myself who did not do well in school, but who done well post-school. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think people kind of, they want to get A, they want to get B, and when they don't get those grades, they, I guess they feel that, something isn't right or whatever. But what I would say is this. We talked a bit earlier about learning coming in different forms and informal learning being very important, right?
Right.
There also has to be a recognition that an exam has limitations. One limitation is that for most of our exams, except the tech rock ones, um, they are paper and pencil tests. And a paper and pencil test can only, it, that mechanism only has a certain efficiency, right?
Okay.
So, for instance, if someone is good with speaking, a paper and pencil test would not pick that up. If someone is good at doing, a paper and
Mm-hmm.
pencil test would not pick that up. So it doesn't mean a person doesn't know. It means
Right.
that what the medium is has a weakness and whatever. Also, it's a snapshot at a point in time. Think about
Mm-hmm.
running a race. I have a favorite horse. He's retired now, but his name is Jackie's Warrior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jackie might be in second place at a point, but only at that point, because by the time as he get to the finish line, he will cut through the wire,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I say that to say where we are on the day of the exam. And I ain't even talking about if the person doesn't feel well, if the person is
Right.
anxious about
Right. I
taking exams.
understand. Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about your natural development, you at a certain point. It does not mean that you cannot, as time goes on, acquire certain skills and certain abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a death sentence, but it's an assessment of where you are at the particular time. And we talked earlier about people knowing the truth. You need to know the truth as to where you are so you can know how much work you need to do to
Right.
get where you want to be. It's nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong with the reflection of your skill and ability at a point. And so I think I would not call our education system a colonial education system because it's not. Because the colonial system was very, at least the colonial system of education in the 1950s and 40s and whatever, was very deliberate on discriminating to exit people out of the system,
Yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is, everyone did this common entrance exam. If you didn't pass the common entrance, you went on to
Yeah.
the like Eastern Senior or whatever, and you spent another 2 years there, and then you were out because your time was up. At 14, you had to leave. So the colonial system was good at that because they realized that there were limited resources, there were limited jobs in the civil service and whatever. So they were preparing people for those vacancies, and they were only interested in taking the best and investing in the best to do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We have, since independence, just slightly before with majority rule, we have more of approach to give everybody a chance. And the BGCSE actually facilitates that by saying that you on this continuum at this point, but not that that means that you cannot further participate. That's just not the way the system is today.
Yeah. But where I think it's still colonial, it's in the method of the teaching and the passing on of information and interaction between educator and student.
So what do you mean by that?
That still is similar because the classroom mode, for example, uh, we visited a couple of years back when my nephew was graduating from university in Orlando, a young school. I call it not the school is young, but for age, and they did a lot of teaching, basically using music, using speech, using scripting, dance, all kind of stuff like that. That is not traditional for what I would consider would be in the UK schools. And those children were writing immaculate things that I would not even have seen in high school, and they were dead young. I mean, like primary school or lower young kind of thing, and so forth. And so that's when I'm talking about our colonial system, because in our system, and I mentioned earlier that we are basically kinetic people on average. Look at all of the things we excel with highly in sports and craft and stuff like that. They are all kinetic things. I'm not saying that people can't do academic or intellectual or whatever. That's not the issue. It's being able to understand it. I use myself as an example again. I could read until the cows come home. But the minute I go and act out what it was that I was reading or see it in motion, it clicks right away, and I am almost 100% memorized or have it embedded in my head. But as long as I just keep reading, and they've assessed me, and the professionals said I just don't take exams, I don't follow these kind of things, and whatever the technical terms that they use, get into all of that. But the bottom line is, I see that as a challenge for us because we're still using the old system where we're not talking. And Dr. Chapman talks about the 5 love languages. I'm sure we're familiar with that. But there's a 5 love languages of learning too. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say the colonial system. Not necessarily that we are still teaching content that is colonial, but the process as to how we do it. That's what I'm referring to. I hope that clarifies for you.
So what I would say in response to that is that, there's a spectrum of how much you include in the delivery of a curriculum, right? And I would also say that if you go around the world, most classrooms look, and the behavior of people in those classrooms is relatively similar. You have some specialty programs that might, you go in there and you don't see any books and any papers, but that's not the norm. That's really a negligible number of classrooms that would do something like that. I would say, though, that over time, and we have people who are teacher trainers who could speak more intimately about this, but over time there has been an evolution of the different teaching methods. So, maybe in the 1960s, 50s, there was a lot more lecture style presentations in classes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would argue that there are a lot more group work activities. There are a lot more inclusion of things like song and dance. There are a lot more opportunities for people to select activities that they want to do, as opposed to everyone having to do the same type of activity. There is infusion of the modern ICTs within the instructional program to make it more interactive. Some classes, they have it where, as the teacher is teaching, the students on their iPad, when she asks a question, they have to give the answer, multiple choice or whatever,
Right.
and then right away they get the feedback and they know who's writing whatever, and students are engaged. Now, the strong and good teachers, they venture further and further away from, let's say, the status quo. They take risks, they take chances. But there have to be some facilitating conditions for that to happen. One, the teacher has to have the confidence in their ability to lead that type of process, and not everybody has it. I mean, it's just everybody just doesn't have it.
And
It's
that's fine.
the same thing in life.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody isn't an entrepreneur.
Right.
Some people want a nice, safe government job, right? So that's just how it is. One. Second thing is, the school administration has to also be sensitive to these developments, because school administrators, to some degree, have to ensure that what happens in a school will yield the kind of results that they hope to get. And sometimes even a school administrator might not be so sure about this new method. Third thing, parents. If children were to come home, let's say, for instance, and said, we danced all day in school, right? And we so what you study, right? What your homework is, what you...
But that's a mentality.
It ain't none. So parents also are part of helping to keep the status quo.
Right.
And so you get changes, but it's incremental, and it's usually a more long-term process, because education itself is a kind of status quo endeavor in the main. And so, but I would strongly argue, though, if someone who didn't go into a classroom since, let's say, the 1950s, went into a classroom today, yes, the children might still be organized in rows and columns. Yes, students might still have to put their hand up and address the teacher in a formal way. Yes, you have students in uniform, but some of the activities and the ways in which they engage would be radically different than what happened in the past.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. My only point on the issue is that to me, why I use Dr. Chapman's thing with the five love languages, because my love language might be touch, whereas my mama might be service. But that don't mean that's she. If she talks to me from service and I'm looking for touch, we gonna have a disconnect. And that's the only point I'm trying to make. That we need
No,
to
no,
find a
I no.
balance somewhere, right, with that, right?
And there's
Yeah.
this concept about individualizing learning, right? So right now we teach students as a group, right? And that's so because you can't have one teacher for each student. So
Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
try to do things by group. But as the technology permits, and as different techniques of teaching avail themselves, what you want to do is to try to customize to the extent that you can the education for each child. And I see where my one of my mentors, El McGarway, just put a note here indicating that there are research indicates that there are 144 different techniques that teachers can use to transmit concepts. And the stronger teachers will have more of that
Right.
144 teaching techniques in their arsenal, and the teachers who are not so strong might have fewer than them.
Right. Right.
But and that's one of the reasons why in education, and in the Department of Education in particular, there is constant engagement of teachers in professional development activities. Every summer and at the midterm breaks, there are mandatory trainings that teachers ought to participate in, because of
Okay.
this understanding that you have a range of students who learn differently, who have a different set of experiences, life experiences, as we talked about in the beginning. And your work is to try to pull and push different levers to cause that child, each and every one of those students in there, to have something to resonate with, on which they can build, on which they could expand their knowledge, on which they could have a deeper understanding of the content that is being presented. And it's not just the content, it's also the
Right.
skills that
Delivery.
they acquire from interacting with that content, also the attitudes and values. And I want to just emphasize that, because I want it to be clear that when you're teaching students, it's not only about the academics, it's not only about the skills, it's also about the values and the attitudes. And so you have all of these students, you have them from different backgrounds, different levels, and so forth. The teacher has to find a way to use all those resources that are at his or her fingertips, including the techniques, but also including what students know and can do, to see
Right.
how best you could facilitate a learning environment.
Okay. And so, once we were preparing for the show, and once we sent out the notice, some people was hitting me up to say, "What about this? What about that? And please ask about this and that." And so I encourage them to come online and ask the questions themselves, so we can get feedback. 'Cause I'm not gonna remember everything,
Yeah, that's quite fine.
you know,
Quite
and
fine.
so forth. But one that I did capture is this concern that there's this propensity now to take these exams over multiple years. And so the argument that the person was putting was, I guess they have boys, but they were saying that boys would be disadvantaged in that because boys mature slower. And so little girls can, when they take an exam at earlier years, they'll be better prepared to take the exams. And the boys probably taking it in 1 year. I don't know what it is. You could probably say better than me. But the bottom line is, the question is, how then do you reconcile the results over 2 years or 3 years versus the person only taking one, and do the comparison so that when it comes down, the push comes to shove, the employer or whoever it is who's doing this assessment would be able to understand the context by which the exams were taken.
Yes. Now, in the colonial period, they had some exams called the Cambridge Junior and Senior exams. And to
Okay.
pass them, you had to do, let's say it was 5 subjects: English, maths, whatever. You had to pass all to get the certificate.
Right.
You couldn't pass one. You couldn't just do and get the English certificate. You had to
Right.
pass all, right? We have moved away from that. Certainly in the GCE, you did one subject on its own, and if you got that one, you could take it and use it. And then what you're talking about now is people even not doing them all in the final year of schooling, but stretching it out over 2 and sometimes 3 years. You have to understand what it is that you want from the exams. If you want the exams to measure that someone has acquired a certain level of knowledge, if I did it in grade 10 and I passed the math in grade 10, is the assumption that I will lose that content over the years of grade 11 and 12, and so by the time I get to university, I wouldn't know the stuff anymore? If that, and also if I did the exams all in grade 12 but didn't go straight to university, is the assumption that I wouldn't remember the stuff anymore, and therefore those results are not good? I think the thinking now is that once a person has demonstrated that they could hit the mark, whether they did it all one time or whether they did it in tranches, you will accept that that person has met certain competencies. And then you could assume that once they have gotten to that level, even if there's a little bit of learning loss because they just didn't do it over a couple of years, they could read their books over and then they will get back to that level. So I think lately, in the last, I would say 20 years, teachers and school administrators have not only been more tolerant of that notion of students doing the exams in multiple years, but in a lot of instances have promoted that so that students could concentrate on 1 or 2 subjects, get them under their belt, and then go on to some other subjects, as opposed to being overwhelmed by having to do, like how you said, you had to do 7 one time, and it was kind of like, oh, you get anxious and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's the thinking behind it.
So is it, because I think it's important that we set clear expectations from these exams with our people. Otherwise, if we don't, then people will create their own expectations that might not necessarily be appropriate for what the exams, etc., and the curriculum are designed to do. So I don't know if there is a need for some public service education to help people understand what we expect to get from. Is it that we will expect just be measuring the person's individual capabilities, or are we expected to see how they fall against other people? Those type of things is, I think, what the public is asking for help to understand. And that's when they don't hear anything, then they push back with all kind of anger and stuff like that.
Yes, and I think you're quite right. There has to be, not that efforts were not made in the past, but this is the kind of thing that it has to be sustained, right? You have to constantly tell people about these things. But there are a couple of things that I think in particular that you alluded to that I would want to speak about specifically. The first one is the type of exam the BGCSE is, right? It is an exam to reflect positive achievement, but it's also an exam that discriminates in the sense of is like what they call a norm reference exam. It's seeking to compare people with their group so that you can know who is the best in science. Because if this person is the best in science, the individual and others might want to know that, because you could channel them into careers that require a high level of science, strength and knowledge in science by the student, as opposed to the student who might really be better off learning modern languages. So if you got, let's say, D and E in biology and chemistry, but you got A and B in French and Spanish, you might be more, and so that's one of the things that the exam does. It also seeks to help employers to know, and also universities to know where exactly to put people. What is the best fit for that person based on whether their competency appears to lay. There are other types of exams, for instance, like something like a driver's license, the test you do for your driver's license, where once a person has a basic competency, you don't mind how many people pass that, because you're not really trying to get the best driver. You're only trying to get a driver who is sufficiently competent to work on the road. Now, if you need a driver to show for the governor general or the prime minister, and you want your best police driver, you might
Right.
do a test out of them. All of them got the driver's license, all of them could drive, but you might do a more non-reference test around them now because you're looking for the best driver,
Right.
the
Right.
prime minister. And so I think people need to know what these exams do and what they're all about. I think that the other thing that people need to really understand and appreciate is what it means to get a D. As you pointed out earlier, you put a nice graphic there that shows that D is not necessarily dumb.
Right.
D means that you can do certain things. And I
Right.
think perhaps more of that type of information needs to be put out. And indeed, I don't think it should only be done with the national exams. I think, and there's something that we tried, but we try some things and they don't work.
Right.
But and one of the district superintendents in the past, Miss Lenora Black, she did this in her district, and we wanted to do it nationally, but we just couldn't get it off the ground. But it was to list the core competencies at each grade level. Like, what is it that your child, the basic things that they would know in math and English and maybe science and social studies in grade 2, in grade 5, in grade 8, so that parents know that by the end of this year, if your child cannot multiply 2-digit numbers by 1-digit number in grade 2, something wrong. Your child is behind the standard. And I think that way you can assist the home, which is really one of the main drivers of student achievement, right? The home and what the home is able to bring into to the table. But you would be able to assist the home, even in homes that are not on their own strong, with being able to assist the student and the education system by extension with moving the students through the system and holding them accountable for certain performances at various levels.
Yeah. So we almost exhausted space and span. So the question though would be this: on the national exams, the what we know as A to C, the girls predominantly dominated that area, and below is the ones where the boys dominated. But there's also almost, I don't want to say a 2-to-1 ratio, but there is a good significant ratio that is way more boys than there are girls, according to the statistics that you national statistics that you sent. I didn't do the calculation to normalize that by grades by per student, in terms of make that the common denominator, because to me you always have to have a common denominator in order to make comparing two numbers sensible. But I mean, I guess that's just the science in my head. But
No, you're right. You're right. But I mean, what is done is just the raw,
right,
not that much of processing done to the numbers. You're right.
right, yeah. So the question that I'm asking then is that, is there an avenue, or you talk about different changes in the form that you all do, but from where you sit now, is this something that the GPPI can look at in greater detail to assist those who are doing policy, etc., in the education, considering where you all sit in education?
Right. Right.
UB really should be the policy maker for the country, as far as I was taught. I don't know if it's still
Well, I
that's
wouldn't say the
the
policy
teaching
maker.
that is there.
I
Well,
wouldn't
when I
say
say
policy
policy,
maker,
they should share.
but providing information
Right, that's
to
what I mean.
support the policy making process. Yes.
Yeah, they should be the lead in that process. That's what I mean.
Yes.
Not necessarily the one who makes the actual policy.
No.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, not that we hold that for them people we elect.
That's
But
right.
which is a different show again. Anyway,
Right.
so
But what I would say
go ahead.
to your question, as I am understanding it, yes, the GPPI should and actually is involved in supporting decision making of that type. As fate will have it, when I was at education, I was asked to prepare a concept paper on the factors, a concept paper for a study to commission a study by GPPI on the factors that impact on student learning outcomes. And lo and behold, now I'm out now at GPPI. I'm not the principal investigator, but I'm
Yeah.
involved with that project. And so what we are looking at in that project are the individual, family, school, and community and policy factors that impact on the outcomes that students experience in schooling. And so you may have heard, the minister refer to it a number of times. So that's a commissioned piece of work, and hopefully that'll be completed within the next, I think it's 2024. It's supposed to be finally completed, but I might be wrong with the date.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But that is only one such work, and there are a lot of other things that can and should be done. One of the challenges that we have, though, is having access to a robust set of data.
Okay.
Because there's so many things that impact upon student performance. So, for instance, one of the main themes of your show is male underachievement. Male underachievement is something that many have written about. But male underachievement could have its genesis in a number of different things.
Yeah.
And you could have some underachievement that may not just be a factor of a person being male. And
Right.
so you need to really be in a position to collect data on the family, socioeconomics of the family, things like parents' level of education, because all of these things also matter. Whether there is a father in the home, we have 40% of our households female-headed. All these things could be impinging upon these outcomes. That's not to say that we are not going to do anything, or that whatever we do can't have some utility.
Right.
But I just say that because I think in the Bahamas generally, there is an aversion to supporting the collection of data for public use. So the Department of Statistics, they had a lot of challenges this last census round, where all sorts of things happen. And I mean, real unkind things where people just flat out refuse to give the data, where in some cases they, chase the people away in a violent way
But-
and all of that.
So
So
that goes to do with trust, though. I mean, that's the bottom line there. However you want to spin it, if there's a distrust between the people and the government, then they're gonna rebel. The bottom line.
yeah, but if people continue not to support the data collection efforts, these national exercises, then decision making is going to be that much more compromised. And so
Right.
we have to find a way to get out of this rut,
Yeah.
because
You gotta
we're
talk to people.
the losers when we don't get the kind of information we need to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, we gotta start talking to people and stop talking at people, and so the people want to feel valued. They want to feel that they are part of the process. And if we just show sound bites and things at people this way and that way, then they feel disconnected. They're not gonna engage. I mean, that's simple. But when I look at what you just saying, one of the things that I know for a fact, right? I've seen it in Little League, Junior League, Senior League, college, and even now in the work environment. If a male does not have a male icon to strive to beat their chest to say, I want to be like that person, they're not going to strive to be their best. If there's nobody out there who's stretching them to say, oh, but you can achieve this, because they might in their mind believe that they could only go 2 foot. And I look at Coach Cartwright, who comes to church and deals with the high jumpers, and how he gets the high jumpers to jump even higher than what they probably thought they was going to be able to jump. There has to be somebody in there. And in the school system today, I am told, you could correct me better than anything, but I'm told that the percentage of male images, I'm not just talking about in the classroom, but even in administration, is so small that the boys have very little to look up to. Is what would we do to fix that?
Well, we do have a
If that is a
challenge.
problem, right?
We do have a challenge in terms of presence of male on the campus. If you are going to relate their numbers to the women, the last time I saw the stat, it was below 20%. I can't
Wow.
remember quite what it was, but it was below 20%, and that was some time ago. And I'm not optimistic that the situation has improved. It may have even gotten worse. The problem is even more grave at the lower levels of schooling. I don't think I don't think the ministry has any males in the pre-primary area. They may have
Wow.
one, but you know, and at primary schools, they're very few and far between. Secondary schools, you tend to have more males because I guess, for a number of reasons, it's something that males are more comfortable dealing with. But it's a challenge in the sense that it would be ideal to have an adequate number of males. I'm not necessarily saying 50-50 because I
Right,
don't
right.
know
No, yeah.
that life always measures things out in that kind of equal
Oh,
equal nature.
right.
But certainly more men who can have more of an influence on boys as mentors. One thing that we have found, and I don't have any like, data to support it, but it's kind of anecdotal, is that the PE teacher and the band teacher are two of the most, and some of the tech folk teachers, but especially the PE and the band teachers, they're the ones with a lot of influence on the students, on the male
Okay.
students, and especially if they want to be in the band or they want to be on the school team and one of the
Right, right.
sports like basketball or whatever. If you have a good coach, someone who is really strict and setting standards and whatever, you get to see a lot of young men who straighten up and fly right, and who do
Right.
because of the same thing of having someone, a mentor, someone who beyond simply teaching them the X's and O's or how to blow a trumpet, you know, saying to them, you can do better, and if you're gonna be with me, you have to do better.
Right,
I
right.
think that type of thing, even in families, right? If we had more of that, where there were either the father present or some male figure present, a father not present, an uncle or grandfather, whoever, or even someone at the church or some neighbor take an interest and say to the youth, to the young men, the young boys, we expect more from you. And
Right.
this is a challenge because people do not seem to want to challenge people, tell people the truth all the time, and so forth. We have to tell people what our expectations are of you, and we, want you and expect you to come up to the level that we set. And I think the family generally in the Bahamas is, I don't know if to say in crisis, but maybe crisis is the word. And part of it is because we don't have all the players who are there contributing in even measure. And even if you're not together, if the man and the woman are not together, that doesn't mean that the father should not have
Right,
access to the children first,
right, right,
because he got to get access to the children out with him, and also that he should then appreciate that that's his role, and that he should take it on.
right.
And so we have to encourage people to do that. And you don't have to have a bunch of skills, right? People like Ben Carson, he
Yep.
talks about how his mother used to tell him about doing his homework, and he didn't realize his mother couldn't even read.
Right, right.
It's just a focus. It's just showing that you care, showing that you're setting these standards, showing that you want more for this child, and you're gonna help them to get there. And we have to do it. We have to
Yeah,
do it.
and when we looked at that also with him, there was also always somebody out right at the door, either shooting crap or
Right.
hitting this or shooting a gun, and so but he still had to study through all of that,
Because of
and
the
he did it.
focus
Right,
that the home brought.
right,
And I
right.
would say
Yeah,
too, we kind of lost a little something because in the colonial times, when you didn't go to government high and you were kind of kicked out of school at 14, one of the things that really helped a lot of young men, talking to people of that generation, and looking back at the whole situation, was the fact that many of them went to what they call learn trade.
Right.
Learn and trade was an extension of their schooling. And because of the relative, because they were young, right, and they went to work with a senior person, right,
Right.
they were kind of like undermanners. You couldn't be there cursing and whatever, even though you're on a job
Oh,
site with men, because you are the apprentice, and your ma send you to meet a learn trade boy, so you go focus. And
yeah.
that was not only a transference of skill, but that was also a mentor, someone who was saying that I'm going to help you to be in a position to be able to earn a living for yourself and to take care of your
Right.
family. And you could work with me. You could be my mentee. You ain't going out there doing no shabby work because you're a reflection of me, and I
Right.
expect you to do this work well, and so on. And so, I mean, okay, things change and that system is not there. But the point I'm making is that system was one type of system. And to some degree, we
Right.
could bring some element of that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can bring some element of that back. Yeah.
Yeah. My submission to a couple of persons in the last 2 or 3 governments was we needed to adopt a registered program from 3 to 5, 3 to 6, and 3 hours on a Saturday, where all of the civic groups are registered. The government might even fund them in an incentive. And when you left school, you had to go and engage in 1 or 2 of those programs and bring back your credits and so forth and measure it. And if you weren't programmed with it, then at some point in time you will go see Mr. Boot Camp at Defense Force to shape you up a little bit. I don't believe in the program that they have on the TV. I think that's a little over the top, but I
Oh, you mean the shock?
because yeah, well, I wasn't call a name, but anyway, yeah,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
but I understand the philosophy behind why it's done and all that kind of stuff, but I just don't agree with it. That's just like spanking or beating. There's a big difference to me. But even though we all got whatever we got, but I've asked you a lot of questions, and there's a ton more that we could ask, but I promised you an hour, and so we try to stick with that. I don't like to cut off my guests, so that's why I let you continue to talk. But before we go, tell us, while you wrap up, where you see in this new role you have, where the education we need to take it in order to cost the production of our boys to raise significantly, considering the results. And I apologize to the guests for not having it, deleting the files, the slides, but I will post it underneath the chat afterwards, so you can see what the results was if you didn't see it before. But I think that's a public document, right?
Yes.
Stella? Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll post the results so you can see what it was, and I think it's over a 5-year or 6-year period where they compare from year to year to year to year what the results was, so you could do your analysis and look at it and see what you think is happening. But when we look at all of that, then how do we move forward? And what I haven't asked you that you want to say, could you mix up all of that together and close us out with that?
All right. So I think you're asking me what is it that we could do in the school system to make it a richer learning opportunity for young men. Well,
right. And what you want to say, what you didn't say already. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think for me, everything starts with the home. I think we do need stronger homes, because I think students need to come to school ready and interested in learning, even just the concept of learning. I'm not talking about whether they find a teacher boring or not, because I mean,
Right.
you could learn and find a teacher boring, but so many children, they come to school late. They miss school when they feel like there's no kind of accountability on that. They come to school without the tools, no book, no pencil. I mean, that's just completely unacceptable. They come with bad attitudes. They fly up in the face of teachers and school administrators. All of that stuff got to be out. And I think it's the home that has to set those conditions to start off with. When you go to school, you go in there to learn. You have to respect the people who are there, and so on. You have to be prepared, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is that we do need to ensure that teachers are assessing all of their students so that they can understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and to the extent possible, customize learning to the degree that they can. We have a wonderful opportunity now where we have so much in the way of learning resources that are being developed, digital learning resources that are being developed, technology that is available for the infusion into the instructional program. So I think we need to have a lot more small groups and groups working at their pace and in their interest areas of interest. I think another thing that we could do and probably need to do is to create some specific new learning environments for students. I don't see why we can't, and it might be administratively a headache, but why we can't, especially at the upper secondary school, create learning environments. Let's say, for instance, and this was something that we were looking at. I don't know if you know, the Ministry of Education has a building right across from AID.
Yeah.
Um, right. So we were looking at perhaps using that building for a technical vocational center. And in there, you would have some space for some hands-on work, some space for some class work. And those students who went there would be they would be apprentice in various industry things 2 or 3 days a week. And what you would do is you would integrate that with English specific to the field, the technical English, technical math,
Okay.
technical science to support what they're learning. And so you would also introduce certifications that are skill based. And so if you learn how to change an alternator, you do the assessment for that, and you get and that kind of thing for a lot of boys would be mm, would be good because they would get the kind of hands-on that they like. They
Right.
would be
Right.
getting the academics to back it up because you need the academics, and the reason why you need the academics is because the technology changes. And if you only know how to do something just by rote, just by
Right.
experience, right, and the technology changes on you, and you can't read the manual to see how you must make the adjustment, you're gonna have a problem.
Right.
Um, and
We don't
but
look at
also,
manuals. Yeah.
yeah, but also, but also, um, uh, 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 to have industry partnerships with industry so that they can bring some of their tradespeople in there to actually help students to the concepts to be crystallized in the students.
Right.
And then I think finally, what I would say is that um, the labor market needs to also um, uh, continue to push for people to be certified, not the let's say the BGCSE type of certification, because I
Right.
mean
Right.
that is problematic, but the
Right.
industry recognized certification so that people could realize that in order for you to get these jobs, you have to get the certification, and I think that will be an incentive to help students, especially males,
Right. Right.
to stay in school and get some of these skills and content that they need.
Yeah. Thank you. I know on that point, just the other day we was watching a video where they were saying that there's this movement to an affinity to have people be more certified than actually going to university because university is so long a period and it costs so much that if they just go and get certifications in certain things, whether it's coding or this or that or whatever it is, then they could go and do the actual functional in the workspace and work online or whatever else to do the longer term education
Yeah, you see,
as a part of the process.
university is more education, right? I think once we get our students to upper secondary and they do not show that they are necessarily university or interested in university,
Right.
we have to provide them with training. Yes, you still
Right.
give them some education because you want them to still be a citizen who could function, in
And
the
be
various
productive. Yeah.
ways. But you certainly want to provide them with a lot more training. So when they leave, They have skills, actual skills. I can hang a door. I could
Right.
shingle a roof. I could, I could set a tub in a bathroom, right? Concrete skills.
Yeah. So tell us, there's somebody who I have to put up, because if you don't answer these people, then you will be in trouble. You know.
Well, it seems to be a statement about how empowering it is when a mentor takes a mentee,
Mm-hmm.
and it's empowering in so many ways. Of course, it has to be the right type of mentor, because if it's the wrong mentor, you learn the wrong thing. But
Well, we have that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We,
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah,
that happening all
yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Actually, they might be more
More prevalent than
organized
the other ones,
and
right?
think than the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
we want to have good mentors, and I think it can be done, and we just have to put our heads together as to how it can be done. Churches, um, uh, you know, uh, civic organizations, all of them have a part to play in this, and some of them do a wonderful job in mentoring. I think right off of the Girl
Right.
Guides,
Yeah.
they do a wonderful job in mentoring in terms of the attitude and values. They may not focus as much on the academics and the skills,
Academics. Right.
but certainly and all of that is needed. All of that,
Yeah.
because
It's a
you have to,
balance. Right.
yeah,
A blend. Mm-hmm.
all of that is needed, because you don't want someone with a great knowledge of physics and chemistry, and they use that knowledge to make bombs, to blow up things. You
Right.
want that
Right.
person to use their physics and their knowledge to be able to make sure that people get potable water and all the things that free electricity and stuff like that. So values and attitudes are tremendous, and mentorship is one of the ways to transmit that.
Yes. So, Madam Garraway, do hit the like button, hit the share button, do all of that. Tell your friends. That's how we can get more of these people that you mentioned here to have access to the content that Mr. Taylor. I got to call him Mr. Taylor today. You know, next week I call him something different, but today is Mr. Taylor. We can get the information out and share with all. So I mean, that's the idea of the show, is to try and get more of this information in the hands of people who not hearing it. Because if we only listen to the media, we're not going to get it, because they're going to follow whatever is going to bring sales to their advertisements and stuff like that. That's what they will target. And stuff like this don't really hit main media. Maybe if there's a program written specifically for it, so such and such. So thank you kindly for those comments and all who commented and so far. And so, Marcellus, if there's nothing else that you want to say at this time, we really thank you for joining us this afternoon, which is now dark, so it's mostly evening. And you are always welcome to come back. We could talk about another phase of this whole big picture and what's going on in the school and how you develop in your new chapter, so that we can keep abreast of keep our fingers on your pulse, because we like to track those who making a difference in our society. Don't mind what the chatter is out there when people get caught up in the wave of this and the wave of that and all that kind of stuff, but continue to do well, and we know that's in your spirit. Know you a long time, and I don't know if you could hear that playing, but that's a big one. But we really, really, really thank all of our guests who tune in and listen to the whole thing, because it's important, and we look forward to building up. So thank you again. I don't have Madam Producer today with me, but I'm sure she'll be back shortly.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed being on your show, and I'd just like to thank your audience for tuning in, and encourage them in their own spheres of operating to let's see how we could get our country to or members of our country to realize that national development isn't just a Brave Davis thing. It's just
Right.
not a Hubert Minnis thing or Michael Pintard
Right.
thing. This is something that is done from the ground up, and it takes all of us to play our part. And even if you just say, well, I only just a worker and I have some children, that's enough right there.
Right.
Work hard, be honest on your job, be as productive as possible, give the best quality service on the job. As a parent, make sure you provide for your children, make sure you set the example, responsible example, pay your bills and manage your money and don't live beyond, and all these things, and encourage your children to be the best they can be systematically in every endeavor that they undertake. And even if you only do that, if that's only, right? But even if you only do that, you will be helping to build a stronger Bahamas.
Right. Awesome stuff. So once again, all, thank you all, and see you next week when we might have a surprise guest this time. Somebody who might not be a guest normally, but is a guest. Who knows? Stay tuned. Thank you, Sellers.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative, 242.